this video, we're looking at the human element of O-12, a faction in the Infinity tabletop universe. This video is almost certainly not for you because I won't be discussing tactics or how to paint or how to win or anything interesting. Instead, I'm going to look at political structures, corruption, honesty, and Bureau Trimurti. This video is made for about 100 people, and you know what? That's okay. Who's going to tell me not to? What are you going to do about it? Like, subscribe. It's tough to be O-12. The organization encourages everyone to set aside differences and come together. It begs you to open your heart and mind to true communication. It advocates for a world where humanity can advance and become better. O-12 is also an adjudicator and ends up picking winners and losers. It is therefore often overlooked, unwanted, unappreciated, or hated. If a compromise leaves everyone unhappy, well, then O-12 is the ultimate compromise. It's an interesting time to be alive. Despite contemporary events, the bureaus remain committed to that idealism. They try to juggle being judge, teacher, and adjudicator all at once. Like I said, it's tough to be O-12. Systems are fragile things, unless, of course, you've got people to back them up. People who believe in the pillars of O-12, who serve them in hope that the human sphere can be made into a better and safer place. So, let's chat about the systems of O-12 and how they interact with that goal of being an impartial adjudicator. Starting with funding, then going into Senate and structure, then corruption, and finally, the mechanisms in place to prevent it. When people think about O-12, they think of the bureaus. They are large subsets of the organization with distinct responsibilities. Each is independent over the others and supervised by the General Board, a committee made up of the ranking O-12 officials from the Oberhaus, Petite Assemblée, Security Council, and Concilium Courts. The Bureau's legislative body, answering to O-12's colossal headquarters, is the Oberhaus, or Upper House. Its sprawling and austere campus dominates the core of Edda, the largest city on Concilium Prima. It is an architectural glory that seemingly goes on forever, filled with endless meeting rooms, conference chambers, offices, servers, archives, and of course the physical buildings belonging to the Security Council and the Senate. The Security Council, also known as the Concilium Council, is small and important. Its membership represents the human sphere's power brokers. All major motions passed by the Oberhaus must be ratified by the Security Council, and this requires support of 75% of the membership. The Ariadne representative is controversial, since they're the newest member to the council and they represent barely 10 million people compared to the billions of Pan-Oceanians. Spokesman Abel, the popular representative for Aleph, is also controversial and the frequent target of Tunguskan legal challenges. Associated with the Security Council is the Conclave, also known as the Diet of Concilium. This small group consists of the active heads of state of the G5 nations. In practice, though, these heads of state are all too busy to participate, and they delegate their job to various functionaries. The Conclave's only legal power is to add or remove member states to themselves and the Security Council, but the Conclave also works as a general diplomatic function by facilitating meetings and exchanges between the highest officials. Below the Security Council is the Senate. This is the primary legislative body for all of the human sphere. It has a fluid number of members and features members from every human power. The Senate decides on international laws, treaties, and agreements between national and corporate interests. The Senate often draws up general terms and goals for legislation, then uses the processing power of Aleph to fill in the specifics. Only the senators vote on motions, though, requiring a clear majority to pass. Bureau Noir does everything it can to monitor the process, and Bureau Concilium tries to keep everything transparent, but backroom dealings still happen. Senators are appointed to 4-year terms by their representative nations. On average, there are about 200 members in the O-12 Senate, although that number can go up or down. This quantity changes based on the whims of a second legislative house, the Petite Assemblée. There are exactly 30 seats in the Petite Assemblée, known as the Langaj Benkoj. That's Esperanto for long seats. 5 from each nation on the Security Council, plus 5 O-12 representatives, all of which have a 10-year renewable appointment. The PA's powers allow them to forcibly end debate in the Senate, which can be used to prevent the Oberhaus from taking action on certain issues. They're also responsible for impeaching any Security Council members, but their most valuable tool is control of the Senate seats themselves. At the end of every 4-year term, a Senate seat expires. It simply ceases to exist. It's up to the Langaj Benkoj to decide if it gets renewed. They might also create new seats, which they might assign to national interests as normal. But the seats can also go to corporate interests like PharmaCorp, ethnic groups whose voices need to be heard, or even local interests like the refugee groups. These seats are filled however the polity wishes. Pan-Oceania might have an election for it, haqqislam might just choose a hakim. The sessions of the Petite Assemblée are held in total secrecy, very different from the Senate. In practice, the most controversial and volatile issues are brought up in the Assemblée first, before debate spills out to the Senate or Security Council. The PA is regarded as impartial and uncorrupt, but also cutthroat, exercising realpolitik to get things done. Below the Senate are the courts. Here, justice is served and the four pillars are upheld. The courts deal with all issues of international law, and at their apex is the High Court. They might be compared to a national Supreme Court. Cases can be appealed to it, but wartime breaches of the Concilium Convention are also automatically remanded to the High Court. If decisions are too fraught for the independent context of any of these courts, they can also refer rulings all the way up to the Security Council. And below those courts are commissions. A commission is a temporary task force dedicated to analyzing and solving specific issues. They are initiated by the Senate, the Security Council, or the courts, and have executive functions in whatever particular problem they're solving. This could be entirely advisory, or it could be an active role. Examples might be a temporary commission to explore mining rights in the Bring-a-Salmon Belt, or they might be more permanent. It is through the High Commissions that the ongoing conflicts on Concilium and Paradiso are conducted. The Paradiso Joint Command was hoped to be temporary, but there is no end in sight. That particular commission is renowned in its effectiveness and coordination between powers of the human sphere. Some commissions are extremely secretive. There are a huge number of internal regulators within O-12, working as best they can to root out corruption. One top-secret commission stands out within Bureau Noir. They have no name, nor does the enemy, for they are merely parts of Bureau Noir. You see, there are agents who have been exposed to one war crime too many, who have had their convictions bent but not broken. Agents who have lost their morals, exposed to the misery and despair of the world, and radicalized into misanthropy. They believe that conflict powers progress, that times of chaos will allow the human sphere to grow stronger from the resulting arms and technology races. In their eyes, human history has proven them right. Some among them just want to see the human sphere shatter, having lived one lifetime too many. Bureau Noir considers this nameless cabal to be one of the greatest possible threats to the human sphere. They're dangerous in part because they're charming and driven. Thankfully, the commission aimed at suppressing and eliminating the cabal has been successful. For now. Other commissions are less successful. Ikari Company is known to use flare chaff arrays on aircraft and combat vehicles to accidentally set fire to civilian infrastructure. Charges against them are almost always mired in subcommittees, where officials can be subverted and the charges usually disappear. Corruption can take many forms. It is, at its heart, dishonesty by people in power who use that power for personal gain. When there are this many layers of power, some argue that corruption is inevitable. After all, O-12 is the heart of competitive and cooperative negotiation. They're solving technological issues, social questions, legal queries, and military conflicts. O-12 ends up being the parent making the final decision on aid packages, trade deals, military deployments, political agreements, corporate negotiations, anything and everything else. True impartiality is impossible. Humans grow up with individuated experiences, genetics, and circumstances that shape their worldview. A truly unbiased reading of the law is theoretically impossible. Some radicals advocate for further Aleph involvement, implying that Aleph could be a suitable replacement for many such negotiations. Naysayers respond that Aleph is just an artificial intelligence, and while it might contain unending knowledge, that knowledge is also man-made and therefore fallible. As such, humans still end up making the final decisions, and those decisions are never going to make everyone happy. It's the very nature of a legal dispute that means someone will feel wronged, and will almost always feel wronged if the judgment goes against them. In short, heavy is the head that wears the crown, although O-12 is no imperial government or anything. See, it might have significant powers in its capacity to mediate, and it does have impressive enforcement abilities. Those are not always deployed to their fullest extent. Take the Jinqingcheng prison city on Shentang. Every quarter, they hear reports about abuses of prisoners, and every quarter, they request to inspect the facilities. Every time, they're denied. They can use legal threats and fines on Yujing, but the state empire is powerful enough to absorb both of them. So what should O-12 do? Do they deploy Sword 4 and raid the prison and liberate the inmates? Should they take this to the very top of the High Court? They could, and they might. But there are so many other issues. Policing a sovereign state's prisons ends up somewhere in the middle of the docket. Yujing will treat some of their rulings as lip service. If the issue is ever resolved, it won't be for years, and Yujing can do what it likes with prisons in the meantime. Although, unless a group of Bureau Noir agents, perhaps drawn from the best of the best across the human sphere, infiltrated it and found evidence of what was happening, but, that's a story for you to resolve. Sometimes O-12 can cut directly through the red tape. When civilians are directly threatened, they often leverage their political and legal mechanisms to deploy direct legal or military action. The more flagrant, the better. There is a prescribed course of action. You're supposed to start and end with court systems. Investigative and advisory panels can actually skip court rulings and request immediate intervention. This is not used every time. Think to the aforementioned Jincheng prison. Not every single breach requires maximum force to be used, right? But still, they can use it, and they do use it, which sets them apart from the dead United Nations. This unfortunately loops back into the question of corruption. If you can take action, and corruption does exist, then corruption can be used to force that action. Subverted officials might let Drew's Bayram security off with a hefty fine. And that's bad, but O-12's worst nightmare would be Bureau Aegis deploying military assets, like a cudgel, to help some corrupt official. Anyway, as you can see, corruption is not some byword. Its existence isn't simply accepted. Because O-12 is more than just rules, it's also enforcement. Its own members are very aware of the power they have. Corruption is hunted, consistently, constantly, acknowledged but not tolerated. Organizations and systems are just constructs. They're not real. They fail all the time. They're made up of people, and people give in to corruption anytime the risks are outweighed by the rewards. Example, if your cousin or your best friend has a business, it's normal to want to help them out, but maybe you do so at the expense of your integrity and taxpayer funds. Maybe in exchange, you get a fat payout, or a charity you run gets a hefty donation. Maybe it's monetary. Aleph and its algorithms try to sniff it out. The waters get muddy because corporations and nations often send personal gifts instead of outright cash bribes. Let's say you're a surveyor in Bureau Tiandi. Maria Rusheva shows up at your office and implies that she works for Tristerion Confidential Courier Services. If you leak some data about blind spots in the survey network, well, that means the packages she delivers might just get to their recipients in half the time for half the cost. And if you do it, your sister gets offered a great job with Tristerion. Oh, and your cousin's charity dedicated to helping military veterans? Yeah, they'll get a substantial donation from the Bank of Tunguska. And don't say anything, you're not under any obligation, but here's some hot stock tips. Oh, and also if you don't leak those survey routes, everyone's gonna know that you watch anime. Disgusting. The interconnectedness of the human sphere means that corruption can be hard to track at the micro level. What about the phrasing of laws on electromagnetic weaponry? You can't use EM weapons if civilians are nearby because it would disrupt their cubes. But what if you made it based on a narrow spread template instead? You could call it a zapper. You could maybe sneak it through a session of the Concilium Senate. If you take these bribes, you're a taker, in O-12 slang. A taker might just give away info for money. They might be more active though, smuggling tech from battle sites on Paradiso, running drugs in their convoys, making vital paperwork disappear. This term has heritage in the idea of taking a bribe, but it has some nuance within O-12, whose idealistic rhetoric talks so much of giving. A taker is therefore the antithesis of this ideal. There are also moles. A mole is someone inside O-12 giving information to someone they're loyal to. Clearances, names, dates, whatever, maybe just leaving a door unlocked. Moors are harder to find because they can't afford to be demoted lest they lose their usefulness to their real employer. They often do their best to be discreet and forgettable. So those are just two examples. People can fail you, but people can also be counted on. It is the expectation of corruption that allows O-12 the capacity to mitigate it. One of the tools to prevent corruption is boring but useful: funding. Corruption will occur if the corrupt gain is greater than the penalty multiplied by the likelihood of being caught and prosecuted. Therefore, O-12 being financially independent and keeping its staff in reasonable comfort helps to make those potential corrupt gains unappealing. On the whole, every member state pays an equal portion to the operating budget, but that wouldn't be nearly enough to fund the mess of agencies and programs. Security Council members pay a significantly larger share, called the Secureco Funduso, or Security Fund, which is more closely tied to the wealth of the Security Council members. But this full operating budget still wouldn't be enough. That's where the expanded budget comes in, both a source of incredible power and constant ethical headaches. O-12 gets a lot of independent funding. We're talking patents from research programs, lease fees for local services, fines for punitive settlements. But far more money comes in through charging for bandwidth access to Aleph, which is critical to the brain-bendingly complex operations of most nations. Even more money comes in through these circulars. Bureau Hermes runs the circulars and keeps them completely independent from national squabbles. O-12 even managed to keep them running during the Neo-Colonial Wars, decades ago. Turf Wars remain a confusing squabble, with Yujing and Pan-Oceania both competing to run security, but the circulars remain a safe and consistent option for moving goods and people. Trans-Etheria and the circulars alone bring in a significant amount of the expanded budget, and nobody wants to risk access to this vital lifeline. Every individual bureau also gets funding from unique sources that all contribute to the expanded budget. Bureau Agni has patents and fees. Bureau Athena has charitable donations. Bureau Concilium has local taxes, Lakshmi has government tithes, Tiandi sells survey data, and nobody knows where the money comes or goes with Bureau Tot. First and foremost, there are active campaigns. Bureau Concilium and Bureau Trimurti are constantly carrying out investigations in the big cities like Edda. Most of the time, the key players are off-worlders and foreign representatives, who are usually whisked away from the local jurisdictions and into the complex web of interstellar affairs. But despite the danger of lobbyists and influence peddlers, the judiciary and government still pass rulings and laws that are genuinely in the best interest of the human sphere, to ensure that every panel and assembly and task force has an unusual selection process. The people who fill out the positions on task forces are selected for merit and loyalty, but the diversity of O-12 means that you can actually fill out an investigative panel with different competing influences to allow for some small degree of balance. Team selection, you see, is always performed by Aleph aspects. O-12 personnel have detailed files, and when a team is assembled for a task, a legal case, or whatever, people who make it up represent the diverse interests that seek to influence the process. It's kind of a bad solution, to be honest, but by pitting bias against bias, you at least prevent one side from totally dominating any given assignment. And here's the thing, this is not just putting conservatives and liberals on a court. Not everyone knows these biases. Some of them could be totally subconscious and totally unknown to the candidates. Whether or not you like it, Aleph algorithmically generates these task forces and seems very confident in their effectiveness. By recognizing and manipulating biases, rather than pretending everyone is unbiased and gonna work together, O-12 makes its best attempt to maintain impartiality and objectivity in its rulings and enforcements. Most of this is handled by Bureau Trimurti. Trimurti is the trinity of supreme divinity in Hinduism. It represents the creator, preserver, and destroyer, usually Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, respectively. Trimurti has offices everywhere, from Earth to Paradiso to the luxurious resort town of Blois Bleu. They are strictly funded by Bureau Concilium, and they are forbidden from accepting any donation, contributions, or gifts from other sources. Trimurti's main role is to be the support infrastructure for the General Board, coordinating between the other 11 bureaus. The bureaus are firewalled off of each other, and joint task forces are under tight Trimurti scrutiny. Being the coordination bureau also means they handle diplomacy and international relations. Trimurti provides covert security for diplomatic conferences. They retrieve classified information, often requesting the aid of Bureau Noir to do so. The bureau also ends up being the primary spokesperson for O-12. That means they have PR to protect its public image, manage Maya and social media presence, and other fun stuff like develop good graphic design. While every bureau has its own internal affairs divisions, Trimurti has the largest. Due to its remit, it has supreme authority when it comes to keeping every individual agent of O-12 honest. They are generally considered trustworthy. Public respect for Trimurti fluctuates, but their mission as the mouthpiece of O-12 is one that they take with grave severity. Many are eager to criticize O-12 whenever Trimurti announces a purge of a taker or a mole, but Trimurti has some of the best spin doctors in the sphere. They know exactly how to make an admission of guilt feel like a win for justice. And if you ask me, it kind of is. When you say, we messed up and we got him, you are saying that you messed up, but I think it's more important that you're saying, we got him. Trimurti regularly liaises with the rest of the bureaus, especially Bureau Aegis. Bureau Aegis' own internal affairs division is relegated to matters of security, which also extends to the member states of O-12. Although no nation enjoys the idea of their militaries being subject to international scrutiny, the military IAD remains powerful and with a wide reach. The benefits of keeping your rivals under scrutiny ends up being a worthy trade-off. The nomads agree to it because it means Pano has to agree to it. Together, the two wide-reaching internal affairs divisions, that is Trimurti and the IAD from Bureau Aegis, are on a never-ending crusade to ensure fairness. Systems fail, but people believe in them anyway, and some of them have the courage to dive deep into the dark corners of politics, carrying the light of justice in hand. This is the end of the video. It's very specific, and I made it because I think the ideas in it are interesting. I doubt more than like 30 people in the world agree with me. And that's okay, because I made it. For them, and maybe for you, if you found it interesting, at least, which I probably wouldn't. So if you like this crazy specificity, leave me a comment, subscribe, check out the Patreon, or don't. See ya.